my next door neighbor named me Hank. He couldn't say Harry, I guess. He was just about 5 years old.
Are we good to go, Barb?
We're ready.
Okay. Today is February 5th, 2003, and we're talking today to Mr. Hank Frey. And Mr. Frey, if you would like to tell us a little bit about what service you were in and your time of service and your rank.
Well, I was a corporal in the Army, and I was a cook, so I had plenty to eat.
And you were in during World War II?
Yes.
Okay. And what were the circumstances for you getting into the service? Were you drafted?
I was drafted,
Okay.
yeah. Because just before I was drafted, my brother joined the Marines, and he wanted me to join the Marines at the same time. And I said, no, I've got two girls, and I can't join right now. So he joined, and he landed on Guadalcanal. So I probably would have been down there someplace.
And so you said you were married, had two little girls at the time.
Two little girls.
And what was your occupation at the time when you before you entered?
Well, I was a maintenance man for Akron Goodyear, and we built the Von Sikorsky fighter plane for the Navy. And I was a layout man there. I had about 6 girls that I had to keep my eye on, just keep them working. And they were all young, so that I had to watch them pretty close.
And tell me a little bit about that plant and what they built. Can you tell me a little bit more if someone's not familiar with what that is? How was that important in World War II?
Fighter planes.
Okay.
It was a Von Sikorsky F-4U fighter plane. And it was built specially for the Navy. But after they built it, they found out that the prop on the plane would only clear the deck about 6 inches, and it was too dangerous, so they gave these fighter planes to the Marines, and they used them to fight against the Japs.
Now, was there a chance, since you were in a defense type business, that you could have been deferred or not? Apparently not.
Well, to be honest with you, they wanted to defer me because I was working for this Goodyear aircraft. And I said, no, I'd take my chance, so I did.
Okay. So you could have been deferred, possibly.
Yeah.
Okay. And then where were you receiving your basic training? Where were you sent?
Let's see, I took my basic training in California in Camp McQuaid. It was a artillery base.
And then after you fulfilled that time, then where were you sent?
I was sent to Florida,
Okay.
Camp Landing, Florida. And I stayed down there for about 3 or 4 months before they sent me up to Maryland, getting me ready to ship me overseas.
Did you know where you would be going?
No, well, I knew that I was going to France. That's about
You knew
all.
that. And this was around 1939.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. You really had no idea what was your objective then? Everything was kept quiet?
Oh, yeah.
And you went over by ship? And that took several days?
I sailed over there to France in the Ile-de-France.
Okay. And then,
And after the war, I came home in the Queen Mary.
did you?
No, yeah, the Queen Mary.
When you landed there, you landed at France, in France?
Yes.
Where did you land, do you remember?
Well, it was a harbor, and it was about 4 or 5 miles north of the original landing in France. What was the name of the original landing? I can't remember that.
Don't know.
In fact,
Okay.
I can't remember much of anything anymore.
When you got to France, what happened?
Well, we landed in this harbor, La Havre, that's right. Anyway, we walked up a hill, and they told us that there'd be a hot food and a place to sleep. We got up there and they gave us a cup of coffee and a sandwich for our hot food. Put us in a tent that leaked, and it rained that night. The next day they put me on the next day they put me on a 40 and 8 box car. You remember those?
I know those.
And that's when I traveled towards the front. And I went into the 30th Division, had a replacement in the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh. And then, what, you were a replacement there, at what point were they in the, as far as the battle or so forth?
I couldn't tell you that.
Okay. Was it a combat type situation?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Okay. And you
Because
were,
when I went into the replacement, it was a lieutenant in command of this Company D in the 117th Regiment, and there was 3 fellows as replacement. One was a PFC that was just wounded, and he was sent back to the front again, and me, a corporal, a cook, and the next guy was a sergeant, a postman. And the lieutenant looked at all 3 of us, he said, I don't know what I'm gonna do with you. He said, none of you have got any experience. So he said, well, we'll just have to put you up there and let you find out.
so what happened?
Well, I was there for about 3 or 4 days, and some young guy came in, he said, are you Corporal Frey? And I said, yeah. He said, well, you're supposed to report to the kitchen. So, well, all the rest of the guys looked at me and they said, go ahead. So I did. I went into the headquarters company as a cook,
Okay,
and I stayed there for the rest of the war.
did you? Now, who were the people that you were cooking for? Was this the commissioned officers?
Yeah, the commissioned officers, non-coms, and the commissioned officers of the headquarters company.
Okay, and perhaps who might be in there? What, is there any names that we might recognize?
I can't even remember.
Okay, so they were probably, we're talking like majors, captains, those sort of people?
Lieutenant.
Okay. And you didn't have to move around after that? You got to stay put where you were?
Yeah, when the company moved, I moved with them.
Okay. So you were there in France for quite a while?
Well, after we crossed the Roer River, then we moved on towards Berlin, and we crossed the Rhine River, and then I ended up in the outskirts of Berlin. Berlin. We sat there for a week and watched the Russians move in.
And was that because that was their job, they were going to move in first?
That's what Roosevelt, that's what they figured out.
Yeah. What, a typical day for you was what? What did you do? Did you have to get up real early and get started for breakfast?
About 4:30 in the morning, and we had to cook by flashlight most of the time.
Did you have a tent or an actual building? You had a big building?
Oh, no, we cooked right out in the open,
Okay.
because I can remember, we had a sergeant, first sergeant, that wanted hotcakes every morning for breakfast. And even at times I'd jump out of a foxhole and flip the hotcakes, and then I'd jump back down in and count to about 1 or 10 and then come back out and flip them back.
So you were receiving fire while all this
All
was going
that,
on?
it was usually artillery fire.
And then, you had to cook 3 meals a day, or?
No, we were usually on 1 day and a half.
And then how many people did you have to feed?
Well, golly, I never counted them. But I'd say at least 50.
Okay, like a company.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, was there anything in particular that you remember happening that stands out in your mind? Any particular event?
Oh, yeah.
Like, for instance, what?
Sleeping in the snow
Oh.
at 14, no, was it what, 10 below zero and 14 inches of snow. That was in the Battle of the Bulge. I'll never forget that.
How did you survive that?
Well, I came through pretty well. At least I had something to eat those days.
During this, how long were you at the Battle of the Bulge? How long of a time period?
Oh, I can't remember that.
Was it weeks? Several weeks?
Yeah.
probably.
Well, I don't remember how long it lasted. I do remember that they grabbed everybody, even the cooks, postmen, and everybody else, and gave them a rifle. And that's when the Germans started back down through the bulge.
Were you in the Ardennes forest?
I went through the Argonne. I remember that was pretty clean.
And was this after most of the battle had already?
No, it was
It was
before
just
the battle.
okay.
Yeah.
And then, what sights and sounds do you recall from your time there at the Battle of the Bulge? What impressed you? Besides, it was extremely cold.
Yeah.
What about the men around you?
Well, I can remember they were just as cold as I was because their face turned blue.
Did you have winter wear?
Oh, yes.
You did.
Well, when we first got up there, they had ordered boots, rubber boots for us, and they hadn't arrived, so we had to wear those combat boots, and a number of the guys got frostbitten, sent back to the rear. But after the weather warmed up, well, we got our rubber boots.
Now, when you would have your meals and things, did you retreat a little bit back, or how did they do that?
No, I was actually up in the front lines, and when we served the meals, we had aluminum, I don't know how to explain it. They were called meramite, aluminum meramite. Gee, I don't know how to explain it.
Were they like long pans, or?
Yeah. And we used to, we'd take the meals up to the guys that were in the foxholes, and we'd spread them out on the ground and lay down on the ground and dish them out as they'd walk past. So we had quite a time.
So you had to run back and forth with
Yeah,
these pans
Yeah.
while all the fire's going on, the firing.
Yeah, as the artillery came in, we had to dish it out.
Were the men just so starved that they ate, or were they nervous?
Oh, they come out of their holes in a hurry, they just get something to eat, yeah.
Or hungry?
But then they'd have to run back into their foxholes.
And you had plenty of food? That wasn't a problem?
Well, we had food up there every day.
Were you able to get mail very often?
Well, we got mail, yeah,
Did you?
pretty often, yeah. In fact, we'd get mail and find out where we were. A lot of times, in fact, the division went so fast through France into Germany that we were out maybe 10, 15 miles ahead of our maps. We didn't even know where we're at. Half the time we'd have to get the, what was the name of that, red and white? Is that the government issue?
Stars and Stripes?
That's right, Stars and Stripes.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we'd look in there and find out where we were. Because we were surrounded a couple times, Germans in the front of us and Germans on both sides of us. We had stuck our nose clear out into that.
How'd you get out of that?
We got out all right.
Just kept advancing.
Yeah.
Do you remember any particular skirmishes that were especially bad, or?
Well, I can tell you one night I slept in a cellar. We advanced up to where the machine gun squad had set their machine guns up, and it was a farmhouse there. And the sergeant told me, he said, find a place to sleep. So I went down into the cellar, and there was about 10 or 12 other machine gun operators down there. And they were all asleep, and I found myself a place about that wide, right against a big brick wall. And I had a flashlight, and I turned it on, and I looked up on that wall, and there was a big mass of spiders all over it. And it was so cold, I thought, well, those son of a guns are cold too, so I'm gonna go to bed. So I turned off my light and I went to sleep. And I woke up the next morning, and when the sergeant called, come to work, I woke up and I turned my flashlight on, and those spiders hadn't moved a bit. That's one night I'll never forget that.
Did you get a chance to interact with the people that lived in the countryside any?
Well, we weren't allowed to fraternize, so we didn't get a chance to talk to very many of them, except for one. When I was in Magdeburg, Germany, there was a Sergeant Brody. He was a artist, and he was sketch scenes, you know. I got a chance to talk to him, and he gave me some paper and some pencils. He said, best thing you can do is draw. And he drew a picture of an old German. While I was there, I sat there and watched him draw, and he was an excellent artist. In fact, I've got in my book, in my bunch of picture of him and the picture that he drew that day.
Oh,
Yeah.
were you able to do some drawing?
No, I didn't. I didn't have much chance to even write.
So you didn't get much mail out to home?
Well, I did a couple times. They had it all cut up because I mentioned different locations, you know, and they cut it all up. My mother asked me what I'd been doing over there.
After you got through the Battle of the Bulge and you went on down to Berlin, you said, and then how long, or tell me the circumstances of your time around Berlin. What was going on with your unit?
Well, we took over a big beer garden to set our kitchen up in. And for the first time, we had bedrooms where we could go to sleep in bedrooms instead of on the ground. And we were only there about maybe 3-4 days when the Russians moved in. And the Germans were coming across the river, the Elbe River. I remember that. They'd come across in rafts any kind of a boat they could so that they could surrender to the Americans instead of the Russians.
And now, if there was a young person watching this, why would the Germans want to do that?
They wanted to get away from the Russians.
Okay, because of what?
Because the Russians, they'd been fighting the Russians, and they wanted to get it as far away from the Russians as possible.
Probably afraid of execution.
Yeah.
And then, so were you having to handle these prisoners of war that were surrendering? Did your unit get involved in that?
I remember talking to one German that wanted to surrender to the Americans because he didn't want the Russians to capture him. He said that the Americans were going to have to fight the Russians, so he wanted to he wanted to surrender to the Americans. He was a non-commissioned officer in the German army.
And when they surrendered, they just gave up their weapons, basically.
Yeah.
And were they just housed in a certain place, or what did they do with the people that surrendered?
Well, as I can remember going forward towards Berlin, as we were riding these trucks, we captured the Germans and just motioned to the rear and left them run towards the rear. Nobody had bothered them, they just left them alone.
And then you were moving forward then, and where did you end up?
Well, we were moving forward towards Berlin.
And then what else happened after that time? What happened with your unit after that?
Well, if you remember, they give each one of us so many points. And the ones that had so many, had, what was it, 85 points?
I don't recall.
Yeah. They had 85 points that were sent home. They put them all in a division and sent them home. At least they started it for home. But I didn't have 85 points. So I had to stay in there, and in fact, I got home to the United States before some of those other guys did.
And how was that?
What do you mean, how?
How did you get there first?
Well, they sent us through, back towards the French coast to put us on these big ships, you know. In fact, the German painted that portrait up there of me while we were in this little town. And that's when we were shipped back to the United States on the Queen Mary.
So you had thousands of troops on there.
I think it was something like 12,000 troops and about 5,000 whacks on the top deck.
You came into New York,
Yeah.
but now you said you were also in Holland.
Well, yes, before I went to, before they put me into my new division, the whole division was in Herleen, Holland, or right outside of Herleen, Holland, and they gave us, passes to go into Herleen. That's when I met a family by the name of Schmidt, and there was 3 brothers. I remember they were running a bar, and in the back of the bar they had what the heck was it? It was a cheese factory, that's what it was. I can remember they took us back to this friend of mine and I were together, took us back to the cheese factory, and we saw it was beautiful, clean. I never saw something that was so clean in my life. And we sat there and played cards with them, talked to him for a while. In fact, one of the girls, her name was Annie, I remember. We asked her if she'd like to come to the United States. She said, no, they don't stay married over there. So she said she didn't want to come.
So how long were you in Holland?
Oh, maybe a day or two, that's all.
Just a pastime?
Yeah, we were just passing through, yeah. We were heading for the Battle of the Bulge then.
Did you have any friends that you started in with, that you went on overseas with, or did you all break up?
No, when I joined it, I didn't know anybody. I was put in as a replacement, I didn't know anybody. In fact, there's only one guy that I remember that I would like to have remembered. He was a sergeant, first cook, and he was from Maine, and he said after he got back to Maine, he was going to get a job in the penitentiary as a guard. And I often wondered whatever happened to him.
When you were there, during the Battle of the Bulge and everything, we've heard a lot about that lately, especially. Is there, and how everything was backlogged, the supplies were backlogged, and there was this whole time period where the planning was off a little bit. Were you treated especially different because you were a replacement?
No.
You were accepted readily, and
You know, they needed something to eat, so they accepted my cooking anyway.
yeah. So it wasn't really a problem blending in with the group or anything?
No, no problem at all.
Okay. Did the soldiers feel resentful that they didn't, of course you said your unit had most of the things they needed except for the boots.
Yeah.
Did you feel resentment that they felt that, there was this problem with the supplies, and was there a lot of talk about that, or were people just too busy involved in existing
We
every
were
day?
too busy keeping warm.
Yeah. And so you didn't have anything like, did you have blankets?
Oh yeah, they gave us
Okay.
2 extra blankets, and we had sleeping bags. And what we did, we opened up our sleeping bags and put a blanket this way and a blanket this way, and then folded them back over, and then we'd crawl back through there, and then zip up the sleeping bag and lay there and dream about the guys that were back home in warm beds. Boy, it was cold.
Did everybody have to take a turn at doing a watch? Did you have to do a watch?
Well, yes.
And that was about a 4-hour period, 2-hour period?
Well, they forgot about me once. I was on watch. I was on watch in Germany. And I had a big steel drum and a fire going. And then I had to walk up and down along a motor pool. And I was there for 4 hours. They forgot about me. Next day I went in and I chewed the sergeant out because he didn't send my replacement out there. That was a long time to stand in the winter in the snow.
I've heard some of the other soldiers from the Battle of the Bulge say they've never experienced anything as cold
Yeah,
as
it was
that battle.
cold.
If we have younger people, perhaps students listening to this, what do you want them to take away from the Battle of the Bulge and the World War II era? What's important for them to know?
They hope to God that they don't have to go. That's all I can say. I pity these young kids that are coming up, that are going to Iraq.
as far as your time in the service, how do you feel about it?
Well, it was a great experience, but I don't think I'd like to go through it again.
What was valuable about it for you?
Well, it was just a new experience. You know, all the equipment and all the movement and the way it was fought.
Do you, I wanted to go back, do you remember how you got points? How would you get a point?
No,
I just wondered, because I wondered if it was based on if you served in a battle, or if you had a
Yeah.
certain amount of time, all of that went into
So
it.
many days that you've been in the Army. And
Yeah, so there were lots of ways to get points.
yeah. I don't
Okay.
remember what I had. I think I had about 83, and you're supposed to have 85.
Yeah.
So I didn't get a chance to come home. I got home anyway, before they did.
When you came home, was your family able to come to meet you? Or you had to wait? Was your family living in Ohio?
Oh, yes, they were living in Ohio.
So were they able to come to New York to meet you? Or?
No.
Okay. So then did you take a train back, or?
Trained back to a fort in Indiana. I don't remember what the name of the fort was. That's when I was discharged.
And then you,
And I never got my discharge medal.
oh, really?
I don't know where it happened to that.
And when you got home, did you take advantage of the GI Bill any, as far as?
Oh, yeah, I went to art school.
Okay.
I finished 3 years of art school before I got a job.
And you said you worked for the Department of Energy?
Well, first I got a job in Marion, Ohio, in an advertising agency. And I worked there for 7 years before I went to New Mexico.
And you stayed most of your life in New Mexico?
How long was I in Mexico?
About 1956 or 7.
I don't remember.
Been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
How do you feel? Did you think that was a great thing when you got the GI Bill?
Oh, yeah, I never could have gotten a chance to go to school because, you know, especially right around the Depression, there was no money. So that's when I went to art school. Went to art school in Pittsburgh Art Institute.
So you moved your family all up there, and
No,
they stayed?
they stayed in Ohio,
Okay.
in Oroville, Ohio, and I roomed with another buddy in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Is there anything that we've overlooked that you'd like to put into the interview about your time?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. And you said you really hadn't been able to keep in touch with anybody over the years?
No. I got acquainted with so many, and sometimes it would only be for a few months or maybe for a couple of years, but I never did get real close. They told us in the beginning not to get real friendly with anybody because, you know, in a battle or something like that, if they get shot or something, you couldn't stop and pick them up or help them in a way that, I guess maybe that's the reason I never got real close to anybody.
Do you remember seeing some of your friends being killed in action there?
Oh, yeah. I can remember once in Germany, I was peeling potatoes for the next day, and there was a young GI there helping me, and he went out in the morning and stepped on a mine and was killed. I don't even remember his name.
how many of your unit returned? Did most from the Battle of the Bulge and all that, did most of them return or not?
Well, there was a lot of casualties, but I don't remember what the number was.
Did
That's the reason I was sent up there as a replacement.
Right. Did your wife, how did she say life was at home for her? Was she working or?
Yes, she worked.
Did she?
She had to take care of 2 girls.
Did she live with family or she was independent there?
I think she stayed with her mother and father, didn't she? Huh? I can't hear you.
Remember?
Oh,
So she had some help along the way then
Yeah.
while you were gone? Okay. Well, unless you can think of anything else you'd like to put in here, we'll
I
just
think I made a mess of it.
call it a
As
day.
it is.
Okay, well, we thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Of course, I couldn't remember a lot of things, but
You know, everybody says that since we turned it off.
in Paris, and I had a friend that had bought a bottle of champagne, and I got a letter from home saying that I had a son. He said, let's celebrate, so he took his bottle, opened it up, and we drank the whole bottle.
And you got home a month after he was born.
Yeah,
So by the time you got home, you had how many children?
3.
3.
Well, you see, before I was sent to Florida, I came home to Florida, from Florida on a 3-day pass. My wife told me then, she said, I don't think you should have come home. So that's when I got the letter over in France that I had a baby boy.
Wow, that's neat. Well,
So we celebrated a bottle of champagne.
that's neat.
That's it. Thank you.